All right, welcome. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on a concept that honestly powers almost everything you do online. I'm talking about cloud storage, cybersecurity, you name it. It's called virtualization, and it's all built on this really cool, really simple idea: how to make one single computer act like a whole bunch of them. So let's dive in.
So think about this for a second. How on earth do you fit an entire data center inside a single box? I mean, how do you take the work of dozens and dozens of servers, the ones handling email, running databases, hosting websites, and somehow cram all of that into just one physical machine? It sounds kind of impossible, right? Well, that's the exact problem virtualization was invented to solve.
Okay, to really get it, let's look at how things used to be done the old way. Back in the day, if you needed a server for your email and then another one for your company files, you had to buy two completely separate physical machines. That meant more hardware, a bigger electricity bill, and yeah, a lot more cost. But the virtual way? It lets us run all those different jobs on just one powerful server. We're talking big savings on money, energy, the whole shebang.
So how does this magic trick actually work? Let's get into it and really understand the big idea here.
The best way to wrap your head around this is with a simple analogy. Just imagine your computer, your physical machine, is a great big house. Now, virtualization is like dividing that house up into smaller, totally independent apartments. Each apartment has its own kitchen, its own bathroom, its own furniture. They're completely self-contained, but they all exist inside the same building, sharing that same foundation.
And that's really the official definition, right there. It's the process of taking one physical computer and just slicing it up into several virtual computers. We usually call these virtual machines, or just VMs for short. And the crazy part is, to the software running inside one of these VMs, it looks and feels exactly like its own real separate machine.
Okay, so to make this all happen, there are a few key players you need to know. First up, we have the host. This is the actual physical machine you can go and touch. It's the server in the data center, or maybe even your own laptop. It's what provides all the real hardware: the CPU, the memory, the storage. In our analogy, the host is simply the house itself.
Then, of course, we have the guest. This is the virtual machine. It's one of those self-contained apartments we were talking about, living inside the house. And each guest can run its very own operating system. So you could have one guest running Windows while another one right next to it is running Linux, each with its own apps, and they're completely isolated from each other. So that leads to the big question: who actually builds and manages all these apartments? Well, that's where the most important player of all comes in: the hypervisor. Think of the hypervisor as the secret sauce. It's this special software that creates, runs, and manages all the virtual machines. It's basically the building manager, making sure every apartment gets its fair share of the resources, the electricity and water, or in our case, the CPU power and memory. And it makes absolutely sure that they don't get in each other's way. Yeah, the hypervisor is really the engine that makes this entire thing possible. So let's take a closer look at exactly how it works.
The whole process is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. First, you obviously start with a powerful physical computer. That's our host. Step 2, you install the hypervisor software onto it. Then, using that software, you create a new virtual machine. You basically tell it, okay, you get this much memory and this much processing power. And then the final step, you just install an operating system and your apps right inside that new VM, exactly like you would on any normal computer.
Now, it turns out there are really two main flavors of hypervisor. On one hand, you have Type 1, what they call bare metal. This is the heavyweight champion. It installs directly onto the physical server hardware itself, which makes it super fast and efficient. This is the kind of stuff that powers massive data centers. On the other hand, you have Type 2, or hosted. This is just an app you run on top of your normal operating system, like Windows or Mac OS. Okay, so we've covered the what and the how. But now, for maybe the most important part, the why. Why does any of this matter? What makes this technology so revolutionary?
Well, the benefits they're huge. For starters, businesses can save an absolute fortune because they don't have to buy dozens of different physical servers anymore. It's just way more efficient. You use less power, you take up less space in a server room. And here's the really cool part. Because a virtual machine is basically just a collection of files, backing it up is incredibly easy. You can take what's called a snapshot, which is like taking a perfect, instantaneous photograph of your entire virtual computer. If anything goes wrong, you can just restore it from that picture in seconds. This makes recovery super simple and lets you create these safe, isolated places for testing things out.
So just picture a typical company, right? In the old days, they'd have one box for email, another for files, a third for their database. 3 separate physical machines. Now they can just run 3 separate virtual machines all on one single powerful server. It's a huge consolidation, and it just simplifies everything.
And this brings us to a super important use case, cybersecurity. When a security expert finds a really suspicious file, what do you think they do? They definitely don't open it on their own computer. No way. They detonate it inside what's called a sandbox, which is just an isolated virtual machine. So if that file turns out to be nasty malware, it can go wild and do whatever it wants inside that VM, but it's trapped. It can't escape to harm the real computer or the rest of the network.
But, like any powerful technology, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are trade-offs, and it's really important to understand the fine print before, putting all your eggs in one virtual basket.
So what are the downsides? Well, the biggest one is pretty obvious when you think about it. You're creating a single point of failure. If you put all your important systems on one piece of hardware and that hardware dies, well, you see the problem. Performance can also take a little bit of a hit because all those VMs are sharing the same resources. And finally, software licensing can sometimes get a little tricky and complex when you're running lots of different things on one machine.
So let's picture it. Here's your setup. You've got one powerful host server, and it's running 3 absolutely critical virtual machines. You've got your email, your files, your database. Everything is humming along perfectly. It's efficient, it's clean, it's a great system.
Until it isn't, because if that one single physical host machine fails, everything goes down with it, all at once. All those apartments suddenly go dark because the main building just lost power. This right here is the biggest risk, and it's exactly why things like having backups and redundant systems are so critical when you're working in a virtual world.
Okay, we've seen how this stuff is amazing for business it is and for security, but now let's talk about the single biggest role that virtualization plays, something that affects literally all of us every single day.
Here it is. When you hear someone talk about the cloud, services like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, what you are really hearing about is virtualization, just on an unbelievable scale. These companies have these massive data centers packed with ridiculously powerful servers. And what do? They use hypervisors to slice those servers up into thousands of little virtual machines that they then rent out to customers, to businesses, to developers, to you and me.
And honestly, that is the single biggest takeaway here. The cloud is virtualization. That ability to instantly create a new server, delete it when you're done, and scale it up or down whenever you need to, all while keeping every customer completely separate and secure from each other, that's the magic. That's what makes the entire cloud industry possible. Bottom line, without virtualization, the cloud as we know it today simply would not exist.
So there you have it. Now you know the secret of how one computer can pretend to be many. The next time you save a file to the cloud or hear about security experts using a sandbox, you'll know what's really going on under the hood. It's all built on this beautifully simple idea of virtual apartments. And that really just leaves one question, doesn't it? Now that you know what to look for, where else in our digital world do you see this powerful idea at work?